This is no ordinary field. It is the closest I could get to the Green Line, the border between Gaza in Palestine and Israel. The region beyond this line has been called the world's largest open-air prison, blockaded by Israel and Egypt and controlled by the Islamist political and militant group Hamas. And the border here is quiet, because it's 2022 and none of this has happened yet.
More harrowing stories of how people were killed in the Hamas attacks are still emerging.
Hamas will understand. We will exact a price that will be remembered by them for decades to come.
Israel continues its mass mobilization of troops, hundreds of thousands.
Israel preparing to launch a controversial offensive in Rafah. That's despite mounting international pressure to abandon the plan.
The death toll, according to the Gaza Health Ministry, has now surpassed 30,000 Palestinians.
It makes me sick that the world is turning its back on us and it's not doing anything to protect us.
Breaking this morning, the International Criminal Court has announced it is seeking arrest warrants for Israeli and Hamas leaders, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
The Gaza Strip is home to over 2 million people, in an area 45 kilometres long and 10 kilometres wide. It's one of the two entities that make up the Palestinian Territories of today, the other being the West Bank. There are no air or sea routes into the Strip, but there are 3 land border crossings. The Rafah and Kerem Shalom crossings on the southern borders with Egypt and Israel, and the Erez crossing in the north on the Israeli border. The 1948 First Arab-Israeli War saw the creation of Israel as a state, but it also cost 700,000 Palestinians their homes in what Palestinians call the Nakba, the catastrophe. They fled to Gaza, the West Bank, and the surrounding countries. After the war, Gaza was occupied by Egypt. But following another conflict, the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel took control of the Strip. Under the Israeli occupation came the First Intifada in 1987. Intifada is the name given to Palestinian uprisings against Israel. And it was during this unrest that the militant group Hamas was born. Hamas is an acronym, translating as the Islamic Resistance Movement. It's both Gaza's main political party and a militant group. In the 80s, it originally published an infamously anti-Semitic charter. It outlined the destruction of Israel as a state and rejected the prospect of any negotiations or peaceful resolutions to the Israel-Palestine conflict. It later revised this charter in 2016 to appeal to moderates, but fanatics and extremists remain in their ranks. The First Intifada would come to an end in 1993, when a peace agreement called the Oslo Accords was signed. The hope was that this might pave the way for a Palestinian state alongside an Israeli one. In 2005, Israel withdrew from Gaza and handed over control to a governing body called the Palestinian Authority, which was governed by a political party called Fatah. Fatah had also been involved in armed resistance against Israel. But where Fatah and Hamas differed was that while Fatah supported the Oslo Accords and the pursuit of peace, and was relatively secular in its goals, Hamas opposed them, and wanted to destroy Israel as a nation and replace it with an Islamic state. The first elections were held in Gaza in 2006, and to the shock of Israel, the West, and neighbouring Egypt, who all favoured Fatah, Hamas won the election. This kicked off a battle for control over Gaza between Fatah and Hamas. After 10 days of fighting, Hamas emerged the victor. This is why the two Palestinian entities are controlled by two different groups today. While Fatah governs the small, fragmented regions of the West Bank that Israel hasn't yet fully occupied, Hamas runs an authoritarian government in Gaza. And no elections have been held in Gaza since before Hamas came to power. Various countries and international bodies recognise Hamas as a terrorist organisation. Some of them only apply that label to its militant wing, estimated to be 35,000 to 40,000 strong before the war, not the administrative government. At the same time, Hamas has support from a portion of Palestinians who view Fatah in the West Bank as corrupt and ineffective. and Hamas as one of the only effective resistance movements against Israeli occupation. After Hamas took control of Gaza, Israel and Egypt imposed an indefinite blockade of the Strip in 2007.
And since then, Israel in particular has been accused of facilitating a humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
This is why some call it the world's largest open-air prison. Israel built the Gaza-Israel barrier, or Iron Wall, around Gaza, preventing vital supplies getting in and exports getting out, crippling the economy and severely restricting the movement of people. The exact statistics vary, but before the war even began in 2023, according to the UN, over half of Palestinians in Gaza lived in poverty, and the unemployment rate was almost 50%, one of the highest in the world. Israel provides about half of Gaza's energy needs and reduces or cuts that off during periods of conflict. Some of that energy is used to power Gaza's desalination and water treatment plants, giving Israel the ability to dramatically impact the water supply as well. Because of that blockade, the UN still considers Israel to be an occupying power in Gaza. And to get around it, Hamas built a network of tunnels, not only to get supplies in and out, but also to allow Hamas's militant wing to carry out surprise attacks against Israel. Many of the Hamas attacks are launched from civilian areas in Gaza. So while Israel has launched strikes that they claim only target Hamas, in reality, those strikes cause mass civilian casualties. According to the UN, over 5,300 people had been killed in the Strip and over 150,000 injured between 2008 and 2020. Israel also elected its most extreme government in history in 2022. Now, previous governments were not exactly good for Palestinians, but this one in particular is not interested in a peaceful two-state or one-state solution to the conflict, and has become ever more hardline and oppressive towards Palestinians living within Israel and the occupied territories, in what human rights groups have called an apartheid system that deprives Palestinians of basic rights. This isn't to justify what Hamas did, because it was a horrendous atrocity, and what the victims and their families have gone through is unimaginable. But it's undeniable that all this has driven support to militant groups in Palestine. These groups require funding, and Hamas boasts a vast financial empire. Several Hamas leaders currently live abroad in Qatar, and are some of the wealthiest people on earth, worth billions of dollars each. Hamas's wealth comes from its investments, taxation, and donations. And today, the biggest international backer of Hamas is Iran, which is a sworn enemy of Israel. But one thing you might not see mentioned in the media is that Israel helped prop up Hamas. You see, some in Israel believed they could divide and rule Palestine if they fueled a split between factions, pitting Fatah's secular Palestinian nationalists against the religious fundamentalists of Hamas. Benjamin Netanyahu, the current Israeli Prime Minister, was instrumental in that approach, allowing money to reach Hamas from abroad. This was supposed to not only ease tensions between Israel and Hamas, but also to prevent Palestinian statehood as long as that split between factions continued. Here is a far-right Israeli government official saying the quiet part out loud. Hamas is a terrorist organization that no one will recognize. The main pitch we're playing now is international delegitimization. Hamas, at this point, in my opinion, will be an asset. But on the 7th of October 2023, at the end of a month of Jewish holidays, Hamas militants breached the Iron Wall, entering nearby communities and a music festival, massacring civilians. 1,200 people were killed in the attack, over 200 were kidnapped and taken to Gaza, and a UN report found, quote, clear and convincing information indicating sexual violence perpetrated by Hamas. Israel responded by launching a brutal siege of Gaza that at the time of recording this has displaced almost 2 million people and killed over 30,000. Israel has claimed, without providing evidence, that 14,000 of these were militants.
and around 16,000 were civilians.
The current Israeli invasion of Gaza is the fourth and by far most destructive war in Gaza since 2008.
And has led the International Court of Justice to rule that the population of Gaza is at imminent risk of genocide.
The timing of all this was also significant. First, the October 7th attack came during the holiest month in Judaism, the High Holy Days, when soldiers, officers, emergency services, and politicians would have been sidetracked by the festivities. Second, the attack came after Israel had been distracted by internal divisions for years, which worsened following the election of the most extreme far-right coalition government in Israel's history. This government has encouraged more Israeli settlement of Palestinian territory in the West Bank. As a result, military resources that usually would have been stationed on the Gaza border had been diverted to the West Bank to guard Israeli settlements that are illegal under international law, allowing Hamas to break through the lightly guarded Gaza-Israel barrier more easily. And finally, the war has derailed attempts to normalize relations between Israel and several Arab countries, most notably Saudi Arabia. The Israeli invasion of Gaza now makes it politically impossible for the Saudi regime to continue down that path, at least for now. You'll notice that despite this being a video discussing Gaza, it doesn't feature the voice of someone from Gaza in it. And that's something I try to avoid in general in any of my videos. But there are two reasons for that in this case. The first is that, back in 2022, the blockade meant you couldn't enter Gaza. I didn't meet anyone from the Strip while I was here. And this is part of a pattern on the Israeli side of the border. Even before the war, the impacts the occupation of the Palestinian Territories has on Palestinians was kept far out of sight for the average Israeli or anyone else visiting this part of the world. And it wouldn't be until a month later when I cycled into the West Bank that I'd finally see that. But I did get in contact with Gazan Palestinians once I got home. So that brings me to the second reason, which is that many Palestinians that I spoke to feel the media has done a terrible and often dishonest job of presenting their views and experiences fairly. So those I contacted who were willing to speak about Gaza were cautious about interviews, and preferred to go on the record only in a video dedicated entirely to that interview. So there will be voices from Palestinian communities, Gaza included, in other videos. While that does leave this one feeling incomplete, for now, treat the next part of this video simply as a glimpse of the Israeli side of the border before the war. Because almost exactly a year to the day before the war began, I was cycling along this stretch of border. It's jarring to watch that footage back. The way I'm speaking and filming doesn't reflect the gravity of the events of 2023 and 24 because they hadn't happened yet. Coming from the south, you emerge from the desert, passing the occasional military base or installation. The area is flat and open, giving Israeli forces line of sight of much of the Gaza Strip.
So many tanks over there. I can actually see the city of Gaza through the trees there. There's a big wall in the way now. I'm now cycling very, very close to the border with Gaza. Gaza, the city, is just a couple of kilometers across those fields there. One thing I guess that I'm noticing, well, that the conflict seems very hidden, even though I'm so close to it. Being this close to it, I guess I thought I would see military or something, but so far nothing. I made my way along the surprisingly quiet border to Nir Am, a kibbutz that would, the following year, be attacked by Hamas.
And for reference, this is my route and Nir Am in relation to Gaza and the Hamas attacks.
All of the kibbutzim that I've been to have had gates that lock, and you have to have a key or a passcode to be able to get in. But this is another kibbutz. Looks quite new.
In 1951, a civil defense law was passed in Israel requiring all homes, residential and industrial buildings to have bomb shelters constructed within them.
So all of these homes have to have a bomb shelter in, and many of them have an additional bomb shelter outside if you don't have time to get in. Oh, in fact, there's a bomb shelter literally right there.
I stopped to speak to a resident of Nir Am.
Hey, hello everyone, my name is Moses. I'm living in Iran for almost 8 years. We have neighbors in Gaza. We have a conflict for almost 2,000 years. Who knows, maybe someone will do the peace. Maybe you know that we have only 15 seconds to run away, which means we have to run to the bomb shelter, and you know, there's emergency situation, so we have to run. We heard a siren called red color in Hebrew, of course, and we have only 50 seconds in this area. It's crazy.
And how often does that happen?
You know, on warm days we have almost 5 in an hour.
On the bad days?
On the bad days, yeah. When we have some, you know, a situation around the area, we have 5 red color in an hour. Sometimes we have, you know, suddenly 1 in a day. We cannot expect to regular life around this world. Okay.
When's the last time there was one?
The last time was 3 months ago. We had a little war against the neighbors over there. The period of this situation was 2 weeks. We left the area. We left the home.
It's too dangerous.
Yeah, it's too dangerous. Especially we have the kids. You know, you need to run with the kids to hold them and run away. Especially when you're outside and you can't find any bomb shelters. It can happen, you know, like now. They can drop a missile for, you know. If they like to drop a missile, they will.
Given the number of missiles in red colors, why do people choose to live here? Yeah.
You know, this is this kind of duty to be here, especially when we had some history, you know, from my white family. So we are the next generation of this in this area and this kibbutz, and we can't leave this place. You know, from the beginning of the history, this Jewish land. Okay, we got it from Abraham, okay, and from God directly. It's part of duty, of course, but when you have a kid, it's not a duty. It's not a life. It's not a standard life. Okay.
That religious sentiment was one I'd hear repeated multiple times on this journey, that some residents of these communities believed this land to be given to the Jewish people by God. But I'll talk about that more in a later video. For now, before I left, Moses agreed to show me the bomb shelter in his home.
This is the bomb shelter, as you can see.
Okay.
There's a special door
against
special missiles
and
kinds of bombs.
Okay. So it's the kids' room.
Yeah, they have to be because if we have a red color on the night, for example, we have to run to the bomb shelters from other rooms. So we set the kids here.
Okay. I guess
until they understand the concept to run on 50 seconds.
Yeah. And so is it basically just very thick concrete?
Of course, we have almost 35 centimeters. So
wow,
it's crazy.
So this is the thickness, right, from here
to
here. So a kid's room and a bomb shelter at the same time.
The attack on Nir Am was repelled. The 35 Hamas militants that tried to break in were unable to get through the fence thanks to resistance from guards at the Kibbutz and, much later, reinforcements. But nearby Kibbutzim saw far more casualties. In Nir Oz, a quarter of its 400 residents were dead or missing in the aftermath of the attack. Just down the road from Nir Am, a few hundred meters from the Green Line, was a cafe and playground next to Black Arrow Monument, named after an Israeli military operation against Egyptian forces back when they occupied Gaza. And outside that cafe, a row of rocket shells that had been fired from Gaza and fallen nearby.
It's a signpost, one that you see on the side of the road. And they're cutting it to parts, and they put in fire powder, and they're shooting it as it is. So it hit the ground, that's the way it explodes. That one on the other side, it's an Iranian missile. Now, this one specific, you see, this is a true missile. They brought the first one from Iran, and then these ones, they start making them on their own.
Okay. When were these fired?
This one, like, I think, 3 months ago, 4 months ago.
These missiles were likely fired by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, another militant group in Gaza alongside Hamas, during the last spike of fighting before the October 2023 attacks. But between 2001 and 2014, almost 20,000 rockets from Gaza hit southern Israel. These missiles are unguided, and most end up hitting empty areas or being intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system. That, combined with an abundance of bomb shelters, means that very few of those missiles end up causing a lot of casualties.
Behind me is a playground, and right next to the playground is this white box. And that is a bomb shelter. If people are here in the playground or at the viewpoint here, and they hear a siren, that means that a missile's been fired from Gaza, which is just behind the trees here. And they have a few seconds to run inside here, take shelter, and wait for the missile to either land somewhere or get shot down by the Iron Dome defense system that they have in Israel. Even back when this was filmed in 2022, the atmosphere of calm on the Israeli side of the border was surreal and showed how normalized the blockade and occupation has become. Over here, people enjoy coffee and ice cream at a playground. On the other side of the Iron Wall, the world's largest open-air prison. And just a few hundred meters from this cafe, in the first 6 months of the war, Israel would drop 75,000 tons of explosives on the Gaza Strip. That's the equivalent of 5 nuclear bombs. And while Israel has bomb shelters everywhere, Gaza doesn't, so the damage and civilian casualty rate is much worse. 8 months on from October 7th, Israel's bombardment and invasion of Gaza continues. And there is a personal motivation for Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netenyahu, to continue this war. This comes from a few different angles. The first is that he holds a razor-thin majority in the Knesset, Israel's parliament. That's why he entered into a coalition with smaller, extreme far-right parties. These include Jewish Power and the Religious Zionist Party, and their leaders are Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. Both are extreme far-right Israeli settlers, and they've threatened to withdraw from the coalition and collapse the government if Israel stops its invasion of Gaza and agrees to a ceasefire. Ultimately, what this faction really wants is to make life untenable for Palestinians in Gaza, which will force them to leave, and for Jewish settlers to take their place. That is the very definition of ethnic cleansing, which is the mass expulsion or killing of members of one ethnic or religious group by those of another. Now, you might think, okay, if the government collapses, just hold new elections.
But the stakes are particularly high for Netanyahu. Not only will people begin to ask how the Hamas attack happened under his watch as soon as the fighting stops, but he's also facing trial for corruption charges, which he'd like to delay as much as possible. So, for him personally, this is not just about political survival, but potentially also avoiding prison. Maybe it's unsurprising then that to date, Israel has rejected plans for a ceasefire, even at the expense of the safety of the hostages still held captive, and has ignored a UN ruling to halt its offensive on Rafah, a city in southern Gaza that was supposed to be one of the last safe zones for Gazans evacuated from other parts of the Strip.
Israel preparing to launch a controversial offensive in Rafah. That's despite mounting international pressure to abandon the plan.
All this while polls have found 60% of Israelis support a ceasefire in return for the hostages held by Hamas, though it's important to note that Hamas too has rejected ceasefires. In June 2024, a war cabinet made up of cross-party officials in Israel collapsed. Benny Gantz, leader of the opposition in Israel, withdrew from the cabinet, citing Netanyahu's lack of a plan for and after ending the war in Gaza.
אנחנו עוזבים היום את ממשלת החירום. בלב כבד, אך בלב שלם.
With the exit of moderate voices from the cabinet, this leaves far-right ministers with far more sway over the progress of the war. And these politicians have pushed for expanding the war and invading Lebanon to fight the Shiite, Iran-backed Lebanese militia, Hezbollah. As I'm recording this, cross-border rocket and artillery strikes between the IDF and Hezbollah on the border in the north of Israel have been increasing, and it looks like the IDF may be preparing to invade southern Lebanon. As horrendous and destructive as the war in Gaza has been, a conflict between Israel and Hezbollah would be a huge escalation. Polls have shown a majority of Israelis actually support this move. But Hezbollah is no Hamas, though the two do have similar, or at least complementary, goals. Hezbollah is the world's most heavily armed non-state actor, up to 50,000 strong and much better equipped and trained than Hamas. And its stated goals are to expel Western powers from Lebanon and destroy Israel. With an arsenal of 130,000 rockets and missiles, it has direct supply routes by both air and land from Iran, and it has successfully fought the IDF to a stalemate in the past. If Israel opens up this northern front in the war, which is looking increasingly possible, the conflict would become a full-scale regional war. A worst-case scenario could see Iran and the US dragged into the fighting. Even Cyprus could come under threat should it allow Israeli forces to use its air bases or ports. As the invasion of Gaza rages on, evidence of war crimes and human rights abuses are mounting. In the months following October 7th, Israel has been condemned for its collective punishment of Gaza, and striking refugee camps, aid distribution points, schools, hospitals, and aid workers, and restricting aid from crossing into Gaza, to name just a few examples. And recent reports suggest that the war is causing a famine in the Strip.
Breaking this morning, the International Criminal Court has announced it is seeking arrest warrants for Israeli and Hamas leaders, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Today, we underline that international law and the laws of armed conflict apply to everyone. No foot soldier, no commander, no civilian leader. No one can act with impunity.
War crimes can never justify war crimes, and claiming otherwise is a very slippery slope and a dangerous way of thinking. At the same time, the situation can be given some context. The 2023 attack, barbaric as it was, didn't happen in a vacuum. So long as Israel keeps up its current approach in Gaza and continues illegally settling the West Bank, millions of Palestinians will continue to suffer, and extremist groups like Hamas will draw more and more support, making attacks like this much more likely. For all the walls it has built, security measures it's imposed in the occupied territories, and military operations it's conducted, Israel has not made itself safer and is upholding a decades-long military occupation of Palestinian territory, a recipe for radicalizing those that are suffering under that system.